Well, a very good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to the channel or welcome back. Bit of fair warning here today. I think the dog's going to be a bit overactive. If you're new to the channel, you won't know that I have a little pooch. Sometimes he gets a bit noisy, but I'll push on through that. But there's a couple of reasons why I think today's video is going to be fairly brief. One of them is I'm not feeling 100% today, but at the same time, I'm feeling well enough to actually put together this video, although I recognise that I'm on early onset, I think, of developing flu symptoms. I've spoken to a few people today and I've learned that there's a new virus going around, basically a flu one, and it starts with stabbing ear pain that goes down the side of your face and then down your throat. So I don't know how I've come into contact with it, but I imagine I have somehow along the way done that. So anyway, my information is it doesn't get better for about 7 days. So I thought, well, I think I'm on to day 3 of it. I'm just going to try and put this video together and do as much as I can, and work on also getting my own energy, I suppose, balanced over the next couple of days. But anyway, I'm waffling here. What I want to do is talk to you about Bumblebee Jasper. I have decided I really dislike it. I'm going to share with you why I dislike it. I regret not fully informing myself before I made my purchase. I made my purchase based on the fact that I'd seen some images of it. And of course, if you've looked at the thumbnail, you know it's pretty striking to look at. But anyway, let's crack on with it and I'll give you the backstory on why I now have to find a way to dispose of my Bumblebee Jasper in a safe way. So the first thing I think to acknowledge is that it is actually a very stunning rock. It looks really amazing and impressive from the photographs. You've got some incredible layers. You've got some stunning colouring. You've got spectacular patterns as well that is part of it. You know what I mean? So it looks really attractive. But it is extremely rare because it is sourced in only one place in the world. And we'll talk about the mineral information in a moment. But yeah, it can command extremely high prices because of its rarity. Anyway, my error was not actually looking at what other people's feedback was before I purchased the crystal. And had I done so, yeah, I definitely wouldn't have pursued it. But anyway, let's look at the mineral content now. So just based on the mineral factor, we've got huge toxicity associated with Bumblebee Jasper. It definitely has high levels of arsenic apparently, but it also contains sulfur. And if you've watched the videos or I put up a video on Realgar and Orpiment, they are both extremely toxic as well, and this is what gives Bumblebee Jasper this yellow. So we're looking at the yellow that you get out of Realgar and Orpiment, same issue there. They're both quite volatile. What happens with the Realgar and the Orpiment, or what we're talking about is the yellow stuff in the Bumblebee Jasper, is it does react to temperature, heat, and also to water. It can oxidize and it creates toxic gases. Now, the problem with Bumblebee Jasper is that it's only found in one place of the world. There's only one source, and that is Java, Indonesia. And what I've learned more recently is that it actually forms, I think, within the volcanic crater, because if you haven't watched my videos before, I'm not a geologist, I'm not an expert on all of these terms, but I can link certain things together and get the picture. So this is the notes that I've got as far as how it forms. It forms in what is called fumaroles, which are the cracks in the Earth's crust near the surface or the top of the volcano where the steam and the gas can escape. Now, when these fumaroles are exposed, apparently they can expose or form for a few weeks, sometimes for a few months, sometimes it might be for decades or even centuries that these fumaroles are exposed. And that's where the miners, we may as well say the miners, have to get into there and actually source the Bumblebee Jasper from there. Now, what I found is interesting is because I've been to Bali, and they have the sulphur springs as well, because obviously they've got a volcano there, and that's where you get the stinky, smelly, hot springs. I mean, I'm talking a little bit off the cuff here and doing a bit of a deviation here, but the difference between those hot springs and what we've got going on with Bumblebee Jasper is that the Bumblebee Jasper is going to vaporize and create really toxic fumes. Now, that leads to another issue, and this is what I learned about in the video that I was watching, and I don't think it's changed. If you live in that area, if you know the miners, I really welcome your input, because until we can get clarification on this, I will not be touching Bumblebee Jasper, even if it's authentic. There is an issue around fake Bumblebee Jasper, by the way, and that is because my understanding is, or the information I got, is that it relies on child, not slave labour, because slaves don't get paid, as I understand it, but children are put to labour sourcing this material. I guess we can call it slavery, because if they're being paid, they're too little, apparently. Sometimes the video that I saw, the gentleman said that he was aware that there were children that were actually mining it that were aged 5, and that a lot of these young children don't make it past puberty. They're dead by the time they're 12 years old, which I find, when we try and be spiritual, we try and be non-judgmental, but at the same time, we're humans walking the planet, and to me that's just really highly offensive. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and the concept of sending children, young children, into these dangerous situations, it just defies my concepts of what a human or moral act would be. And beyond the fact that there is the sending children into these situations, it's even adults, I mean, we've got toxic gases. There needs to be, if you're going to source these kind of materials, you need to have really strict mechanisms in place to keep people safe while they're at work, which would mean specialist safety gear, the breathing apparatuses, things like that. And from my understanding is they don't get any of that. So to me, that is a major issue, a really huge turn-off for buying it. Let's say you could, I'm going to show you the piece that I got in a little while, but let's say it was ethically sourced and it was legitimate, whatever, and you could actually buy it with a clear conscience. It is a fairly soft crystal, okay? I say soft, but it says 5, so it's supposed to be medium softness. The one that I got, though, I would dispute that, so I'm going to show you actually what I managed to source at a fairly cheap price, I might add. So before we look specifically at my piece, I'll show you, because this is kind of a buying information, I guess, strategy, or for those people that haven't done it, I bought this off a platform. I just did a Google for when I was looking for images, and I thought, oh, as you do when you look at this image here, you think, oh, that looks nice, looks like pretty good quality. Actually, probably false, but they're not charging a fortune on it, because obviously the really good quality stuff is extremely expensive, as I said. So it was at a fairly small price, and you didn't get the opportunity to actually pick the piece that you like. So I couldn't turn around and say, look, I'll have that bit that has the stripe running up the center, or whatever. And not only that, it actually said on the website that there was only one particular tower left out of this set. So I thought, oh, well, I've got no choices anyway. But if I want to get a piece of it and add to my collection and actually experience Bumblebee Jasper, then I'll just put my order in, as you do. Pay for it. As I said, it didn't cost me a lot of money. However, it is up there as one of the most disappointing purchases I have ever made through a platform. So now let's have a look at my piece. So in the first instance, when this arrived, because this is exactly what my piece looks like, it's nothing like what I thought I was going to get. In fact, it's such an inferior piece compared to the photographs that I looked at and I just showed you, that I thought I must have been ripped off right from the get-go. So I went and I checked back on the website, and I saw that, funnily enough, my photograph of my item was there, so I can't legitimately turn around and say not as described, because this was the singular piece. If you look back at the group image, my piece is stuck right at the back and all you can see is the little grey tip. Okay, so that's the first disappointment. I go and I have a look and I find out, well, actually, buyer beware. I should have been more attentive when I was making the purchase. But then the other perspective too, because of course I'm into the metaphysical. Now, I don't know if I've told you guys this in the past, but I can generally feel energy from a crystal when it's put into my hand. Now, I want to be clear about this. I didn't know about the fact that there was a lot of loss of life when it comes to sourcing Bumblebee Jasper, and certainly young people's life. What I can say is when I got it out of the pack and I held it in my hand, I thought there's something wrong with this. Okay, it doesn't feel right. It feels flat. I even remember thinking to myself, it feels dead, before I started looking at obviously the image. I thought it must be a fake, right? Because it's got absolutely no energy whatsoever. But like I say, I'll go back to, I thought to myself, it feels dead. It needs to be charged. Now, I hadn't found the video which was talking about the child labour and the death with the sourcing and that kind of thing. So I was not aware of this. I was outside sitting there and actually thinking to myself, what can I do to energise this crystal to activate it, because there's something not right with it. And then I found the video saying what the problems were. So that then leads to the next problem. Okay, I have decided that I don't want to have this. I know I've paid for it. I'm not going to do a return to sender and get my money back. My issue now is, how do I dispose of it? Because thinking to myself, if I put it in the backyard and bury it, it's going to be exposed to water. It's going to release toxicity into the soil, potentially. If I throw it in the bin, it's probably toxic waste. I can't just dispose of it that way. I have to be very, very careful with what I do now to get rid of it. This is my understanding. But I definitely don't want a piece of it. I really don't. Anyway, I'm going to do the rest of the video as I normally would, because there are metaphysical attributes of this crystal if it wasn't flat, right? Let's say under ideal conditions, it does have metaphysical attributes. But the thing is, we can get those attributes by using other crystals. We don't have to buy Bumblebee Jasper. So obviously it's a volcanic specimen. And so if we wanted crystals that carried traits to do with volcanoes, and because anything to do with volcanoes is basically fire, passion, motivation, inspiration, that kind of thing. There's plenty of other crystals out there that we can use to do that. If we're wanting to have yellow crystals, or deep golden yellow, because we do color healing or whatever, well, there's other crystals we can buy that have the deep yellow that we can work with. And if we're looking for the specific attributes of the solar plexus, there's plenty of them around. The other thing too, I might point out, what I don't like about this particular specimen is actually it's not sealed. So that means every time I touch that, I actually shouldn't be touching it, because it's going to have arsenic and sulfur traces, or rilgar and orpiment on my hands. I should actually clarify here too, because I'm not sure that I did, because I'm a bit foggy in the head today. I did actually test it to see if it was authentic, because at first part of me was like, it has to be fake, but it's definitely authentic. But it's certainly not even safe for handling, to be honest. So when it comes to the Zodiac, it's recommended for people with the star signs Leo and Cancer. And I would imagine that's because anything that is related to the solar plexus is to do with that faith, trust, hope, strength, confidence, if people lack confidence. And of course, Cancer, people under the star sign Cancer tend to be or struggle from insecurities a lot, shall we say. So I can understand why it would be recommended for Cancer. However, I would say that you can find other crystals. I'm just going to keep saying that. You can find other crystals besides Bumblebee Jasper to do it. Even actually, I've got plenty of it around here. Is it golden calcite? Golden calcite would be a good one. Healer's quartz, anything like that. Strength, of course, is pyrite. Pyrite's right up there. for helping a person to develop strength and faith and hope and that kind of thing, and actually for manifesting abundance. But anyway, yeah, don't let your star sign determine whether or not you're going to buy a crystal. So, when it comes to Bumblebee Jasper having been attractive to me before I fully did my research, part of it was because of the association with the goddess. I did a bit of research because, to me, when we're attempting to identify what the metaphysical attributes are of a crystal, and if it's a fairly new one, it helps to, I think, get an understanding of what is going on around the environment where that crystal has been found, the cultural implications. So if you've watched my videos on mookaite as a prime example, it's right in the middle of Australian Aboriginal country, and because I understand the cultural traditions, not with any greater expertise either, but I'm familiar with concepts of rainbow serpent, I'm able to put that together as being the attributes of mookaite, for example, or mookite. And so the same can be said with Bumblebee Jasper. I wanted to get more understanding because I know the volcanoes have real significance to the Indonesian people and to the Balinese people, because I have been to Bali, as I said before. They've got, I think it's Mount Agung over in Bali, but it turns out there's more than one actually in Java anyway. But where the Bumblebee Jasper is sourced from, it is associated with a goddess. I hope I'm going to pronounce this right. Kanjeng Ratu Kidul. Okay, so she's supposed to be the goddess of the Javan volcanoes, and tsunamis and earthquakes, just in case you were interested. And basically, there is the perception that these volatile reactions, earth-based reactions, occurs when the goddess becomes a bit peeved. I think I'm oversimplifying it. Anyway, there's a whole amazing story about how a sultan, because if you're not aware, Java in Indonesia, while it's not known to be a Muslim nation per se, that's all it is. It does have Christians there and Hindus and that kind of thing, but it's primarily Muslim now, from what I can understand. But in the past, it wasn't. It was more of a Hindu or Buddhist, Dharma Buddhism, I think they call it, when it's got a lot of Hindu influences. But anyway, in the past, apparently a sultan went up there to meditate, and in the process he made a connection with the goddess, and it interfered with the weather patterns or some such. But I do encourage people to really take a look at that, because it's just fascinating reading these stories. The other thing too, I was able to make the comparison when I was looking at the goddess, that this Javanese goddess, she's seen to be both benevolent and destructive, because sometimes for us to have change, and this is where I feel Bumblebee Jasper has great potential for all of us, is sometimes we become so set and stuck in our ways. It takes major change for us to actually change the way that we do things. And it means often breaking down everything as we've known it before to create new. Sometimes you can use, let's say you were building a house. Sometimes you can use the scrap metal or whatever to build a new place, but sometimes you've actually got to get rid of everything and start fresh. So it would probably be, actually, this just came to me as I was talking through this, it probably would be actually really good for those people that struggle with addiction once they've made that decision. Probably actually, if you're involved in mental health, there's the labels that people put on, which is, if somebody's thinking about giving up but they're not quite made that decision, they would be considered to be contemplative. If they're like, yeah, I know it's wrong, and I'll give up at some point, that's pre-contemplative. So it would be really good for those people that are thinking, you know what, actually I really would like to, but it all looks a little bit hard right now. That's when you would actually give them some of the yellow, not necessarily this one, but if you were able to source it ethically, this one would be perfect actually for those type of people. So it does do that transformation. It does the empowerment. I wanted to say also, when we talk about the Javanese goddess, because my head's a bit foggy at the moment, I'm just wondering, did I mention that when I was reading about what is associated with her, I felt that she was very like the goddess Kali of the Hindu belief. So if you know much about Kali, I think this one would be quite similar. So I'm really not going to get into the metaphysical attributes of Bumblebee Jasper, because the bottom line is I don't think anybody that is into metaphysical attributes would actually feel comfortable purchasing this crystal, because if we want to be tactless about it, because it's probably got bad juju on it. But if you are not into the metaphysical attributes and you still want to give it a whirl and buy some, and you have no conscience in regard to children dying to get you your flashy little bits of crystals, yes, there is a whole big fraudulent fake industry out there. And obviously, as I said, it is extremely lucrative if you can get the ones with the bright colours. That's the ones that the people like, the bright coloured yellow. And people will pay thousands and thousands of dollars for it, which is why obviously people are being abused to get it. But the other thing that they do is when you've got a crystal that can command that kind of price, yes, you're going to get the fakes. Now, I have not been able to establish, to be quite honest, if any of these that we're looking at in these images here are fake. And what I learned through purchasing my own little bit and questioning whether or not it was fake is actually to do the scratch test on it with a little pin, because it should actually it should leave a mark. The other tips I've got here is that fake stones can be overly bright or unnatural, which to me looks like the one on the right. I've got to say that looks overly bright, unnatural, but then at the same time, I think it's from a verifiable source. And when I look closer at it, I think it's probably just up there as one of the most perfect specimens that anybody could actually buy. Because when you look at the black circles, they're not necessarily perfect coloured all around. Then the other signs of fake is... I've got some notes here. Texture. Some of them will feel more smoother than the artificial ones. Some will, if you look closely, some have got resin and glue, especially in the cracks or the seams. Now, I'm going to say that I had a look at mine. I thought that might have been the case with mine, and then I realised, no, it wasn't. Okay, and I'll show you on the next slides in a moment why. It says also that the back of the sign of the crystal may have the bright colours bleeding. Natural crystals tend to have a bit of a duller back to them, but I think that might just also be too where you source it from. The other thing too, if you're going to do the scratch test like what I did, you need to be careful where you're scratching, because remember, this is a toxic mineral. So on mine, where I've tried to magnify in and go in here on the real gar and orpiment to show that, you do get a bit of a textured finish on it. And so I actually stuck a pin in. Goodness me, I'm such a Looney Tune sometimes. I stuck a pin into the little hole. There was a little porous bit there because it looked to me like there was some orpiment, I think it was, that had congealed in this porous spot, but it wasn't. It was actually how it was naturally formed. And then the photos actually don't do justice to the fact that you can have that bright yellow like that, but as you see on the obelisk with the black top, you get black flecks through that. Well, the other thing is too that in my grey, I've got a couple of yellow flecks through the grey part, and I thought that was paint splash, which obviously it's not. But anyway, I put these images up here so that you could get a bit of an idea. The real gar and the orpiment tower, which is the one in the middle with the big leaf on it, that's very similar to the one that I have, and it's actually polished so it can be handled, but you still got to look after it with care. My brain's struggling at the moment. Okay, the image on the right that's got the red in it, that red is the real gar, and Bumblebee Jasper doesn't have as much of that from what I was able to see, so it's got more of the orpiment there. Anyway, moving on. So going to the chakras, anything that's yellow like we have with real gar and orpiment and all the rest of it, as far as the towers go, and the Bumblebee Jasper is going to be very much associated with the solar plexus chakra. If it's got much of the orange in there, it's going to be more linked with the sacral, or it might be balanced between the sacral. So it's very motivating. The black stuff is the grounding stuff. Okay, that's the really anchoring into the earth center. I would also say that if we're talking about goddess energy, such as the goddess of volcanoes, and there's different, in Hawaii, I think it's Pele is the goddess of volcanoes. And sorry, I'm really struggling at the moment because I've got like the ear pain happening. Anyway, yes, so that's the chakra associations. So let's say that my little tower had energy. I'm still not convinced that there's any suitable uses for it because of that toxic component, unless it's sealed. All right. And even then, you would be very, very cautious about how you use it. You wouldn't be wearing it on your body. You might have it perhaps as a jewelry item. I've not seen it as a jewelry item. You might have it as a palm stone. This is a palm stone here. I'd like to think that if they're going to sell that as palm stones, that they actually put a protective seal on it, because that can actually be done. If you're going to have it in your environment as an ornament, because it is definitely pretty, just be aware, if you've got a heater going, or an air conditioner. I'm just thinking we have different types of air conditioners and heaters over here, but we can get evaporation and that kind of thing, and that's going to impact on the stability of the Bumblebee Jasper, from what I know. But of course, you know what? I'm open to people telling me I got it wrong. So if you're the expert on this, and you have bought it, or if you've been there when it's being mined or whatever, certainly looking forward to hearing information from you. Yeah, and if you've just got any experiences at all. So, talking about my piece of Bumblebee Jasper and how would I care for it, because I've got no advice for you. My question actually is, how can I dispose of it responsibly? Because it is toxic, and I just don't feel comfortable about burying it anywhere. I don't want it leaching into waterways. I don't want to put it into the toxic waste to go down to the tip and be put in the fire. Then there's the part of me that says, it's still Mother Nature's bounty. It's pretty disrespectful to get it and throw it away. But it's like, I just don't want that juju. You know what I mean? Like, to start with, my particular crystal feels dead. And I don't know how many people died in the process of pulling it out of the ground. So anyway, I'm going to leave that one with you, because I've decided I'm going to actually perhaps go and have a hot lemon toddy and catch you on the next video. Thank you for being part of my journey. So until the next video, take care, be blessed, stay blessed, be safe. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.